Today on Let the Bible Speak.
All of us live our lives by one of three rules. We'll talk about those next on Let the Bible Speak.
From the Churches of Christ, Let the Bible Speak with Kevin Presley.
And welcome to Let the Bible Speak. It's a privilege to host the program each week, and I'm glad you're a part of it today. We've all heard of the Golden Rule. In fact, it may very well be the most familiar of all the commandments in the Bible. Some variation of it has permeated nearly every culture and every religion in the world. When the Sermon on the Mount, recorded in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus said there, beginning in verse 12, "Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets." Well, this has long been coined the Golden Rule. It is a maxim in civilized human relations. Variations of it have existed throughout the varied histories of religion and ethics and philosophy. But the rule as stated by Christ is quite unique and is an incredibly powerful and successful rule for living. But not all live by the Golden Rule. There are three major philosophies by which people are living their lives today. And Jesus not only enforces the Golden Rule, he illustrates what happens when people follow the other two. And I'll explain in today's study, and we'll begin that in a moment. If you'd like to dig deeper into the Word of God, I'd like to provide you with a great opportunity to do that, and it's free. I hope to hear from you today, enrolling in our Bible correspondence course. You don't need to feel overwhelmed by the Bible. If you don't know how to study the Bible or where to begin in reading the Bible, this course will help get you on track, and it'll answer some very, very important and fundamental questions about the Bible and what the overall message is about. And when you enroll in the course, we send out the first lesson. You take the time to read through it and answer the questions. You send it back to us. We'll check it and send it back along with the next lesson in the course. You do it in the privacy of your home at your own pace, and again, it is free. So let us hear from you today, and we will enroll you in the Bible correspondence course. Connect with us on social media. Go to facebook.com and search for Let the Bible Speak TV. All of our actions are governed by rules. Now, some don't believe they're confined to any rules, at least when it comes to morality and ethics, but yet they really are. Like it or not, any society functions according to rules of some kind, and you wouldn't want the alternative. All of us possess a worldview. That is, we view the world and our place within it through a particular lens, a framework. And that worldview not only determines our philosophy about life and our relationship to the world around us based on where we came from, what we are, and where we're going, and not only does it determine our philosophy about our relationship to God, but it ultimately determines how we live our lives and how we interact with others, including God. When Jesus taught what we call the Golden Rule in the Sermon on the Mount, We recognize it as the moral and ethical maxim by which many claim to try to live by. In fact, some go so far as to believe that if they try to live by the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do to you, well, that's sufficient and they're okay in the sight of God, regardless of what else may be within their lives. Well, that's not true. But one will solve a lot of problems and avoid a great many sins if he or she does live by this rule. You know, the second commandment of all those given to the Jews by Moses was to love one's neighbor as himself. Well, that contains the essence of the golden rule right there, that we are to love and treat our neighbor in the way we would love or treat ourselves. And Jesus said the entire law hinged upon this principle and the one commandment greater than it, which is to supremely love God. Now, to love God doesn't merely mean to have affectionate feelings toward God or about God. No, we should understand that it's a love that is demonstrated by commitment and obedience to Him. And to love one's neighbor as oneself, likewise, doesn't mean to have fond thoughts about them, but to behave toward them as we would want them to behave toward us. So no wonder that Jesus made that principle a fundamental teaching of His kingdom. It's not that as long as we have good thoughts and feelings about people that nothing else really matters. That's not the point. It's this, that I will behave toward and treat others as I would have them behave toward me. And that rules out a lot of problems, spiritually and otherwise, in life. But there are three rules that generally govern human behavior. Three rules of life by which essentially all of us are living our lives today. They've been described as the iron rule, second, the silver rule, and third, the golden rule. Examples of the iron rule are etched all throughout history by despots and tyrants. Might makes right is the motto of those who live by this rule. Whatever I'm big enough to do, I can do. The iron rule without any regard for others, well, that's what we see in the thief and the liar and the murderer, the tyrant, people that have no respect or regard for life and property. Cain was the first person to live by this rule, I suppose. Enraged by his jealousy and spite, he took his own brother Abel's life because he was strong enough to do it. Much later, Alexander the Great conquered the nations of the world until there were no more nations to conquer. Julius Caesar's conquests are summarized by the inscription that was given to him. I came, I saw, and I conquered. You see, he lived by the iron rule. Many world leaders, most world leaders, I suppose, when it gets down to it, live by the iron rule. In the 1850s, Charles Darwin came along and he taught that this was the rule of nature. It's the rule of the jungle, that species survive and thrive by overcoming and destroying other species that compete with them. And later, in the 1870s, in his book, The Descent of Man, he even went so far as to argue that trying to preserve the mentally and physically weak and sick, as we do, that does harm to the human race as a whole. Well, nearly 60 years later, a man named Adolf Hitler came along and implemented this iron rule philosophy. You recall he tried to create a master race by exterminating more than 6 million Jews and others that he thought of as weak and handicapped and inferior. Now then, since 1973, millions of unborn babies have been legally killed in their mother's womb in the interest of the mother. According to the CDC, nearly 700,000 legal abortions were performed in the United States in 2014 alone. Every jail, every prison, every police station, every courtroom, every locked door, every window testifies to how our supposedly civilized and advanced society really lives by the iron rule. Just relatively speaking, in modern times, we're seeing a great lack of respect for life and for property. Today, the iron rule, it's seen in the killers, the robbers, the burglars, the rapists, molesters, the business cheats and swindlers, the gangs and the thugs who blight our times. It feeds on selfishness, greed, and lust, and it says what is yours will become mine if I'm strong enough to get it. You see, people who live by the iron rule are concerned only about their own interests, self-preservation, protecting what they see as theirs, and even taking what is yours. And this rule not only governs how people treat money and property, even livelihoods, reputations, anything that gets in their own way. Now, few will admit to living by the iron rule, but the fact is multitudes of everyday people do so. But then there's another rule. This one was perhaps most famously stated by the Chinese philosopher Confucius about 500 years before Jesus Christ. He said that there is one word that will keep humans on the right path in life, and that is the word reciprocity. What you do not wish yourself, do not unto others. Now, this is sometimes mistaken for the golden rule as stated by Jesus. In fact, some say that Jesus was not the author of the golden rule because they claim it was spoken by many others before Jesus ever lived, Confucius being one. And it is true the ancient Jews had the saying similar to Confucius that said, "What you yourself hate, do to no man." But now there is a big difference between what the Jewish apocryphal book Tobit said and what Jesus later said. There is a marked difference between what Confucius was saying and what Jesus commanded. You see, what Confucius, what the book of Tobit, what other cultures have said down through time basically amounts to the silver rule, which, if you'll notice carefully, is stated in the negative. What Jesus said is unique. It stands apart. Jesus didn't just imply that one should not do to someone what he would not want done to himself. What Jesus said went much farther and stated it in the positive, to do unto others what you would have them to do unto you. You see, the silver rule, while true enough, doesn't go far enough, but it is the rule by which many attempt to live their lives. Now, the silver rule is far better than the iron rule because at least it shows consideration for other people to some extent, but it is altogether negative in its application. And the fact is, you can live by the silver rule and still be guilty of some pretty terrible things when you think about it. In July of 2017, there were 5 teenagers in Florida who videotaped and mocked a 32-year-old disabled man as he drowned in a Florida retention pond. The teens were on the bank smoking marijuana when they saw the man wade into the pond. And when he began to struggle and scream for help, they didn't jump in to save him. They grabbed their phone and began to video, and they laughed at the man as he went under, never to resurface. Police found the man's body 3 days later, and then the video of him dying and the teens laughing surfaced on social media. Police said it appeared the teens did not break any laws, and therefore they were not able to charge them. A perhaps more famous case all the way back in the 1960s was that of a New York City woman named Kitty Genevieve who was stabbed to death outside her apartment while at least 37 people watched. Not one of them called police until after she was dead, and then only one bothered to go call the cops. Now, they didn't kill the woman, nor did they have any connection to the person who did. They simply did nothing. They were living by the silver rule, but not the golden rule. And there were those who sought to later justify all of those witnesses because they were not participating in the crime. Now, those may sound like extreme examples, but you see, these people were living by the same rule that many respectable people try to live by. As long as I'm not hurting anybody, then nothing else really matters. Mind your own business. Just watch out for number one. It's not my problem to deal with. And on it goes. We're a very selfish society that if we don't go so far as to adopt the iron rule in our lives, we only go so far as the silver rule. But Jesus, he taught the golden rule. He said, "Therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets." You see, the golden rule demands positive action. It therefore often requires something the silver rule doesn't. It requires what? Giving, sacrifice, self-abasement, maybe deprivation, certainly devotion, compassion, concern, and love. Living by the golden rule doesn't just mean good deeds. It means turning the other cheek, as Jesus taught in Matthew 5 and verse 39. If your enemy smite you or hit you on the cheek, turn and offer them the other. The golden rule demands going the extra mile, as Jesus taught in Matthew 5 and verse 41. The golden rule requires even giving and lending to those who ask, Matthew 5 and 42. It means forgiving when people ask for our forgiveness. Mark chapter 11 and verse 26. Jesus said, "But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses." Now, Jesus well illustrated these three rules of life in the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. There, Jesus told this story. He said, actually, Luke tells us that a lawyer stood up and tempted or tested Jesus, saying, "Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? How readest thou?" And he answering said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself." See, there's the first and second commandments. Verse 28, "And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right, this do, and thou shalt live." But he, the lawyer, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Now that last question is often the sticking point, isn't it? It was with the Jews of Jesus' day, and it is with many of us as well. Remember, Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, verses 43 and 44, "You have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy." Well, that's the rule most people live by. But he said, "I say unto you, love your enemies." That takes it to a different level, doesn't it? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. So this lawyer asked Jesus, "Well, who is my neighbor anyway? Just who am I expected to love anyhow? How far does this go?" You know, it's easy to love those who love us, but what about those who don't? I'm ashamed to tell you, but it's true nonetheless. There are many who profess Christianity who aren't any farther along than this man was who asked Jesus this question. Well, how did Jesus answer him? Well, with this story. He said, beginning in verse 30, Jesus answering said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And the lawyer said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do thou likewise. Now the road Jesus talked about in this parable that takes one from Jerusalem down to Jericho, I'm told it still exists. It passes, and it certainly did in that ancient day, it passed through desolate, forbidding territory. Back then, thieves preyed upon travelers passing through the narrow gorges and passes. They coveted the wealth of others, and they forcibly took it from them, often at the cost of innocent lives. These thieves were living by the iron rule of life. They robbed this man, they beat him to a bloody pulp, they left him nearly dead, laying in a pool of blood alongside the road. Their attitude was, Thine is mine, and I'll take it, because I can do it. These men loved no one but themselves, and they cared only about their own lives. They were willing to injure and even kill to get what they wanted or felt entitled to. Now, friend, you don't have to be a cold-blooded murderer to live by the same rule these thieves live their lives by. If you will lie, cheat, malign, step on others, injure or hurt others to satisfy or justify yourself, well, the fact is you live by the iron rule. Whether it's on the job, in the marketplace, at school, at home, in some relationship in your life, if you treat others with contempt and don't value their life and their well-being because of your own selfish pursuits and desires, you're no better than these thieves of long ago who lived by the iron rule. And then Jesus says a priest and then a Levite came passing by after this man had been beaten and left for dead. Now these men lived by the silver rule, not the golden rule, and not the iron rule. They lived by the silver rule. And the sad thing is, these were the ones purported to be the most religious and pious people on earth, but they were far from it in reality. You see, the priest saw the man from afar, and not wanting to be bothered, he passed on the other side. The Levite, another one of the priestly tribe of the Jews, at least he came over and looked on him, but he too shrugged and passed on the other side as well. These men were living by the silver rule. What you hate, don't do to another. Well, they didn't injure the man. It wasn't their problem, and so they didn't want to be involved. You see, the silver rule tells you, yes, it's wrong to steal someone's wallet with its $200 inside. But now if you find that same wallet in a parking lot, well, now that's a different matter. You see, these men in Jesus' story, they're living by the seemingly respectable rule of life. What is mine belongs to me alone, I'll keep it. But John later said, whoso hath this world's good and seeth his brother have need and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? 1 John 3 verse 17. The silver rule does not suffice in the eyes of God. It falls far short. And one cannot claim to be a Christian living by this rule alone. Jesus said that the third man that came by was a Samaritan. Now the Jews didn't think very highly of them. In fact, I would imagine that when Jesus said the very word Samaritan, that this lawyer was filled with indignation, that these people listening, probably their nostrils flared in righteous indignation. But Jesus said this Samaritan did what? He not only saw the wounded man, he stopped. He treated his wounds. He picked him up. He carried him down the road. He purchased him a place to stay and recover. He took care of him and then went his way. You see, it wasn't a matter of not doing what you wouldn't want others to do to you. For this man, it was doing unto others what you would have them do unto you. The lesson was obvious to this lawyer who had asked Jesus the question, who is my neighbor? Jesus is teaching that we're to rise far above the thieves and the iron rule by which they live. That we're to go well beyond the silver rule by which the religious hypocrites of his own day and many in our own day live. But to follow Jesus, we must live with the ultimate kind of love, and that is the love that comes from applying the golden rule. You see, until we're willing and able to do that, we really don't know what being a Christian is all about. Remember, Jesus was teaching about the golden rule to disciples, not those who have no moral compass. Those who seek to live like Jesus, those who are seeking to be his disciples, will apply the golden rule to every relationship and every circumstance he or she encounters with other people in life, and it makes all of the difference. It really is what makes the Christian life unique and sets us apart from the world. It's not good enough to say, well, you know, I would never kill anybody and I wouldn't steal from somebody. I'm not out to defraud anybody. I just mind my own business and do my own thing, and that's that. Jesus did not merely teach us not to do harm to others. He taught us to do good unto others. And Jesus himself is the perfect exemplification of the golden rule. When he was persecuted, when he was lied about, when he was reviled, when he was mistreated, what did Jesus do? Well, he turned the other cheek. What did Jesus do when he stood falsely accused? He remained silent. What did Jesus do in the face of those who sought to torture him and ultimately end his life? Jesus willingly laid down his life on our behalf. And if we would be like him, well, we too must follow in his steps. We must be willing to suffer wrong. We must be willing to go the extra mile. We must be willing to turn the other cheek. We must be willing to forgive those who sin and trespass against us. And what a wonderful, what a rich, what a sublime life that truly is when we seek to live by the golden rule. Yes, Jesus calls us out of a life of the iron rule, and he calls us far up and above and beyond a life lived by the silver rule. If we would follow Jesus, we, like him, must make this third and highest rule, the golden rule, the rule of our lives.
If I can help to make the weary glad and help somehow to release the stranger, ease the strain and find some comfort for the lone and sad, then I shall not have lived in vain and stricken vain. If I could be a friend to man, a friend to man, and doing
like to dig deeper into the Word of God, I'd like to provide you with a great opportunity to do that, and it's free. I hope to hear from you today, enrolling in our Bible correspondence course. You don't need to feel overwhelmed by the Bible. If you don't know how to study the Bible or where to begin in reading the Bible, this course will help get you on track, and it'll answer some very, very important and fundamental questions about the Bible and what the overall message is about. And when you enroll in the course, we send out the first lesson. You take the time to read through it and answer the questions. You send it back to us. We'll check it and send it back along with the next lesson in the course. You do it in the privacy of your home at your own pace. And again, it is free. So let us hear from you today, and we will enroll you in the Bible correspondence course.
Follow Let the Bible Speak on Twitter at LTBS TV.
Our time is pretty well gone today, but it's been great to be with you to study the Bible. And if you would like a copy of what we've studied today, we'll be happy to send you a transcript of this program free of charge. Just get in touch with us and ask for the lesson, 3 Great Rules of Life, and we'll send it to you. You can also reach out to us by way of the internet, our website, letthebiblespeak.tv. We're on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, on Instagram. And as well, I want to remind you we have a podcast that you can subscribe to. Just search the iTunes Store or Google Play for Let the Bible Speak TV and subscribe, and you'll get the program each week. Thank you for joining me today for the broadcast. I hope you'll make plans to visit an assembly of the Church of Christ close to you very soon. And I hope you'll plan to meet me back here if the Lord wills for another time of Bible study next time. Until then, hope you have a great week, and may God bless you.
Let the Bible Speak is brought to you by your friends in the Churches of Christ.